Today I'm gonna discuss about the parts of a neuron. Next is the synaptic vesicle, and last one is the I'm gonna try to identify the glia or pardon my pronunciation, and its structure. Okay, so I have here a printed one of a neuron, and it looks like this. So let's discuss the parts of this neuron. So first, as you can see over here, it looks like a roots of a tree, and all of this over here that kind of look like very tiny roots. These are what we call the dendrites. And as we move on over here, as we can observe, this is what we call the cell body. Sometimes they call it sumac. Okay, and as we move on, this oval one over here in the center of the cell body is what we call the nucleus. Okay, and on this part, before we move on to the next part of this structure, this is what we call the axon hillock or hillock. Sorry. Okay, and this structure for the next one, this are what we call the myelin sheath, and and next to that, we need more colors here. Okay, this part over here is what we call the axon. But we have to remember that in between of this myelin sheath is what we call the node of Ranvier. And the last part of this structure is what we call let's use this part, especially this part. These are all what we call the terminal axon. Okay, let's review. So we're gonna start with the dendrites. So the function of the dendrites are the ones that carry nerve impulses towards the cell body. Nerve impulses carries impulses towards the cell body. Next one is the nucleus. The function of the nucleus is that it holds genetic information and instruction for protein production. And then the cell body, the function of the cell body is a location where all the metabolic functions of the neuron takes place. Okay. Oh, sorry. the cell body, is the location where all metabolic functions of the neuron takes place. So next we have the axon hillock. It is enlarged area of the neuron cell body. So this is an enlarged part of the cell body where the decision to initiate or not to initiate a nerve impulse takes place. So this is what we call the decision maker. Next is the axon. So these are the axons. In the axon, it carries the nerve impulses away. So it carries the nerve impulses away from the cell body. Next is the myelin sheath. It's a multiple layers of phospholipid that insulates the axons. It insulates the axons. And next is the node of Ranvier. I believe the function of this one is it places along the axon where it is not covered by the Schwann cell, and this node of Ranvier increases the speed of nerve impulse transmission. Because the myelin sheath, this makes the impulses more slower, and sometimes we might say that it jumps like that, because this one, as Dr. Baldan explained it in our lecture earlier, she said that the impulse goes in and fast, and then slow, then fast, then slow, then fast, then slow, then fast. That's what she said earlier. And then as we move on, we have the terminal axon, or the axon terminal. It is the node at the end of the axon that holds the neurotransmitter. So this one holds the neurotransmitter, which I'm gonna discuss to you about the neurotransmitter later after this one. So hope it helps. So we're gonna move on to our next review, which is the synaptic vesicle. And I believe I drew a structure over here earlier. So now let's start to so first we're gonna name the structure, and this part over here, the ones inside, as you can see, there's red parts over here. Can you see it better? Let's see there. So this one, the red ones, are what we called the neurotransmitter. So remember that axon terminal holds the neurotransmitter, and the whole thing, this whole thing over here, is what we call the synaptic vesicle. While we discuss that one, we also have to know that this whole thing over here is what we call, again, what we have discussed earlier, the end of the axon, is what we call the axon terminal. So, but what do we call the gap between the axon and the postsynaptic neuron? This one over here, the gap between the axon terminal, these are the axon terminal, and the postsynaptic neuron over here. This gap over here this one, is what we call the synaptic cliff. Okay, so as you can observe it over here, it looks like a can, right? It there's an open can and there's a closed can. It looks like a can, but actually these are called the ligand gated channel with neurotransmitter. And this whole thing over here, from here to here, is what we call the post-synaptic neuron. So there it goes. These are the structure of the synaptic vesicle. So let's move on. We're gonna discuss about the to identify the glia and its structure. So I hope I make it correct, because I'm not really sure if I answer it correctly in our completed lab manual. So let's discuss. So this part, letter A, so as you can see, there's an axon terminal, the myelin sheath, the axons over here, the axon hillock over here, the cell body over here, the nucleus, and the dendrites. This structure that labeled letter A is what we call the neuron, right? These are called the neuron. Let's find the letter B. Letter B is what we call the oligodendrocyte. It's a structure that connects two neurons together. But I believe there's a disease that causes the oligo something like that. But yeah, that's for later. Next is letter C. We have to remember that this is the epididymal cell. Epididymal cells. And letter D, this red structure over here, is what we call the astrocytes. The astrocytes. And last one is this structure over here. It's what we call the microglial cell. Microglial cell. These are microglial cells. Again, letter A, neuron. Letter B, oligodendrocytes. Letter C, epididymal cell. Letter D, astrocytes. And letter E, the microglial cell. So, I think that's all we have for today, because we already discussed the three main parts of the day, which is the parts of the neuron, the synaptic vesicle, and we are able to identify the glia and its structure.